"Uncle, your maid steals food for us," said the beggar boy to the millionaire. Richard Thompson nearly dropped his coffee cup upon hearing those words. The businessman stopped on the sidewalk in front of his office building and looked down, where a skinny boy of about 13 stared back at him with determined eyes. The boy wore a worn-out cap and a shirt that had seen better days. His clothes were clean, but it was clear they had been mended several times. Richard adjusted his tie, still processing what he had just heard. "What was that, boy?" Richard asked, lowering his voice. "You're the owner of that big house on Oak Avenue, right?" The boy pointed toward one of the most upscale streets in the neighborhood. "I know because I've seen you leaving in a suit." Richard nodded, still confused about where this conversation was heading. "That's right, sir. Your maid, Mrs. Betty, she takes food from your house and sells it to us in the slum. But she charges way too much and my family is struggling because of it." The boy's words echoed like thunder in Richard's mind. Betty had worked in his home for over 5 years. She was a trusted woman, responsible for the kitchen and household shopping. She had never given him any reason to doubt her. "Listen here, kid." Richard crossed his arms. "That's a very serious accusation. Are you sure about what you're saying?" "I am, sir. She sells the leftovers from your house, rice, beans, meat, stuff like that. But she says it's special food and charges 3 times the normal price." Richard shook his head in disbelief. Betty always provided detailed accounts of household expenses. All receipts were organized and presented monthly. There had never been significant amounts of leftover food. "And why are you telling me this?" Richard asked. "Because my mom is sick and needs proper food, but we can't afford what Mrs. Betty is charging, and also because it's not right for her to do that with your food." The boy spoke with a seriousness that impressed Richard. There was no malice in his eyes, just genuine concern and a determination that seemed beyond his years. "What's your name, boy?" "Tyler, sir. Tyler Johnson." "All right, Tyler. I'll look into this. But if you're lying—" "I'm not lying, sir. I can even show you where she sells the stuff." Richard checked his watch. He had an important meeting in 20 minutes, but something in the boy's tone made him hesitate. "Where do you live, Tyler?" "In the Greenview Heights community, sir. It's past the overpass." Richard knew the place. It was one of the slums on the outskirts of his upscale neighborhood. He always drove past it on his way to the office, but had never paid much attention. "All right, I'll check this out. Where can I find you if I need to talk to you again?" "I'm at the little square in front of Sunrise Market every afternoon, sir. That's where I sell candy at the stoplight." Richard nodded and headed into his building, but the conversation stayed on his mind all morning. At lunch, he decided he would observe Betty more closely in the coming days. When he got home that afternoon, Richard greeted Betty as usual. She was in the kitchen preparing dinner, just like always. "Good afternoon, Mr. Richard. How was your day?" "Busy as always, Betty. And here, how's everything?" "Everything's normal. I did the weekly shopping and organized the pantry. The receipts are on your desk." Richard checked the receipts. Everything seemed normal. Quality products, fair market prices, reasonable quantities for a household of 3, him, his wife, and their daughter. During dinner, Richard casually mentioned it to his wife, Jennifer. "Jennifer, have you noticed if there's a lot of leftover food in the house?" "No, why? Betty always makes just the right amount." "Actually, sometimes there's even a little shortage." "Yeah, I think so too." It was just curiosity. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. The next day, Richard decided to leave the office early and stop by the little park where Tyler had said he'd be. He found the boy exactly where he said he'd be, with a small box of candies in his hands, approaching cars that stopped at the traffic light. "Tyler!" The boy turned and ran to Richard with a smile on his face. "Hi, sir. You really came?" "Yes, I did. I want you to show me where Betty sells those things you mentioned." Tyler quickly put his candies in a small backpack and motioned for Richard to follow him. "It's over at Mrs. Martha's place, sir. She has a little shop there in the middle of the community." Richard followed Tyler down narrow streets he'd never set foot on before. The houses were simple, but he noticed many were well kept. Children played in the street while women chatted in their doorways. "There, sir." Tyler pointed to a small house with a window that served as a counter. "Mrs. Martha buys from Mrs. Betty and sells to us." Richard approached the little shop. A woman in her 50s was arranging some products on a makeshift shelf. "Good afternoon," Richard greeted. "Good afternoon, young man. How can I help you?" "I'd like to buy some rice." "I have two kinds, young man. The regular, which is $3 a kilo, and the special, which is $5.50. "What's the difference between them?" "The special is a good brand, comes from a fancy house. The person who sells it to me said it's the same one her boss uses." Richard felt a chill down his spine. He asked to see the special rice. It was exactly the same brand Betty bought for their home. "And who sells you this special rice?" "A lady who works at a nice house in the neighborhood. Betty, I think her name is. She always brings good stuff." Richard bought a bag of the special rice and thanked her. He left the shop with his mind racing. "See, sir?" "I wasn't lying," said Tyler, who had waited outside. "I see, Tyler. But I still need to understand this situation better." That night, Richard had trouble sleeping. In the morning, he decided to test things. He asked Betty to prepare a special lunch for some clients who would come over on the weekend. "Betty, I need you to buy ingredients for an important dinner on Saturday. It'll be for 6 people. "Of course, Mr. Richard. What would you like to serve?" Richard made a detailed list with specific quantities. He calculated exactly what would be needed for 6 people, with no leftovers. On Saturday, while Betty was cooking, Richard made up an excuse to cancel the dinner. "Betty, I had to cancel the dinner. The client's rescheduled for next week." "Oh, what a shame, Mr. Richard. I've already started preparing some things." "No problem, just put everything in the fridge and we'll eat it during the week." Richard kept an eye on the fridge over the next few days. By Monday, he noticed almost half the food was gone. "Betty, where's the rest of the food from Saturday?" "Oh, Mr. Richard, some of it went bad. I had to throw it out. You know how it is with this heat." Richard knew she was lying. The food had been perfectly fine when he checked on Sunday night. That afternoon, he went to look for Tyler again at the little park. "Tyler, I need your help to understand this situation better." "Of course, sir. What do you want to know?" "Could you tell me which days of the week Betty takes things to Mrs. Martha?" "Sure. It's always on Monday and Thursday in the afternoon. I've seen her pass by here with bags several times." Richard began to form a plan. The following Thursday, he left the office early and parked in a spot where he could see Mrs. Martha's little shop without being noticed. Around 3 in the afternoon, he saw Betty approaching with 2 plastic bags. She went into the shop and stayed there for about 15 minutes. When she came out, she was no longer carrying the bags. Richard waited for Betty to walk away and then went to speak with Mrs. Martha. "Good afternoon. I came to buy more of that special rice." "Oh, how nice, sir. Betty just brought in some new things. There's rice, beans, and even some good cuts of meat." "Does she always bring these things?" "Always. Twice a week. She says her employer buys too much, and she doesn't want it to go to waste." Richard bought a few items and went home with a heavy heart. Not only was Betty stealing food from his house, but she was also profiting off the needs of people like Tyler's family. But when he got home and confronted Betty about it, she vehemently denied everything. "Mr. Richard, I would never do such a thing. That boy must be trying to make trouble for me. You know how it is. Those people are always looking to stir up drama." "Betty, I saw you leaving Mrs. Martha's shop today." "I went there to buy some things for myself, Mr. Richard. It has nothing to do with the food from your house." Betty seemed genuinely offended by the accusation. Richard began to doubt what he had seen. "Mr. Richard, I've worked here for 5 years. I've never given you any reason to distrust me, and now you're going to believe some street kid." Richard felt confused. Betty was right. She had never caused problems before. And really, why should he believe a boy he barely knew? "All right, Betty, let's forget about this." But Richard couldn't forget. In the following days, he started paying closer attention to the kitchen. He began noticing small things that had previously gone unnoticed. Betty always cooked portions that seemed a bit excessive for 3 people. When questioned, she always said she preferred making a little extra to avoid running short. Richard also noticed that Betty had a habit of taking a bag home every day, claiming they were leftovers his wife had allowed her to take. "Jennifer, have you been giving Betty food to take home?" "Sometimes, when there's extra." "Why?" "No reason, I've just seen her carrying a bag every day. It must be food. She always asks if she can take it when there's leftovers." Richard decided he needed more evidence before making any decisions. He started keeping notes on the quantities of food bought and consumed. A week later, he went to find Tyler again. "Tyler, I need to ask you a few more questions about this story with Betty." "Of course, sir." "You said your mother is sick. What does she have?" Tyler's face darkened. "She has diabetes, sir. She needs to eat right on time or she gets worse, but we haven't been able to buy enough food." "And why do you buy from Mrs. Martha if it's so expensive?" "Because she's the only one who sells on credit, sir. At the regular market, we have to pay up front and we don't always have the money." Richard was moved by the boy's situation. Even if Betty wasn't doing anything wrong, that family was struggling. "Tyler, where do you live? Can I go meet your mother?" "Of course, sir. She'd really like that." Tyler led Richard through the streets of the Greenview Heights community to a small two-room house. A thin woman in her 40s was sitting in a plastic chair on the porch. "Mom, this is the man I told you about, Richard." The woman stood up with difficulty and extended her hand. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Richard. I'm Sarah. Tyler told me you've been helping us." "Well, Mrs. Sarah, I'm still trying to understand the situation, but I'd like to learn more about you." Sarah invited Richard inside. The house was simple but extremely clean and tidy. There wasn't much furniture, but everything was well cared for. "Mr. Richard, I work when I can, but with this diabetes I get too weak sometimes. Tyler does what he can by selling candy, but it's not enough." "And do you buy food from Mrs. Martha?" "Sometimes, when there's no other choice. She sells on credit, but it's expensive, especially those special foods she sells." "Do you know where that special food comes from?" Tyler said it's from a rich house in the neighborhood, a maid who sells the leftovers. Richard spent another hour talking with Sarah and Tyler. He left convinced they were honest people going through real hardship, but he still needed to resolve the issue with Betty. He decided to do one final test. The following Saturday, Richard told his family he was traveling for 3 days for work. He asked Betty to take care of the house as usual while he was away. But instead of traveling, Richard rented a different car and watched his own house from a distance. On Sunday morning, he saw Betty leaving with several bags. He discreetly followed her to Mrs. Martha's little shop. This time, Richard waited for Betty to finish her transaction and confronted her as she left. "Betty, what are you doing here?" Betty turned pale when she saw Richard. The empty bags in her hands were proof enough of what had happened. "Mr. Richard, I can explain." "Explain what, Betty? That you've been selling food from my house?" A few people began to gather, curious about the argument. "Please, Mr. Richard, let's talk in private." Richard and Betty stepped away from the crowd. "Betty, how long have you been doing this?" "Mr. Richard, I didn't mean any harm. There was always extra food and I thought..." "You thought you'd profit from my expenses and exploit people in need?" "It's not like that, Mr. Richard. I was just using what would have gone to waste." "Betty, I've been keeping track of the food in my house. You're not just selling leftovers, you're cooking extra to sell." Betty lowered her head, unable to deny it. "Mr. Richard, I need that money. My husband is unemployed and I have children to raise." Richard felt torn between anger at the betrayal and understanding of her need. "Betty, if you were struggling, you could have talked to me, but you shouldn't have stolen." "I know, Mr. Richard, I know I was wrong." Richard sighed deeply. He wasn't sure how to handle the situation. "Betty, let's go home. I need to think about what to do." On the way back, Richard thought about how brave Tyler had been to report the situation, even knowing it could cause trouble for him and his family. When they got home, Richard called Betty for a serious talk. "Betty, you're going to pay back everything you earned from selling my food." "Mr. Richard, I don't have that money anymore. I've already spent it on household bills." "Then you'll work for free until you've made up for the loss." "Please, Mr. Richard, don't fire me. I need this job." Richard spent the rest of Sunday thinking about the situation. On Monday, he decided to talk to Tyler again to tell him what he'd found. "Tyler, you were right about Betty. I confirmed she was selling food from my house. So what now, sir? What's going to happen? I haven't decided yet, but I want to thank you for having the courage to tell me the truth. Sir, what about my mom? How are we supposed to buy food now? Richard realized solving Betty's problem was only part of the issue. Tyler's family would still be struggling. Tyler, what kind of work did your mom do before she got sick? She worked for a family, sir. She was a really good cook. An idea began forming in Richard's mind. What if your mother came to work at my house instead of Betty? Tyler's eyes lit up. Really, sir? She'd be so happy. But can she work with her diabetes? She can, sir. She just needs to eat right and take her medicine on time. Richard decided he'd get to know Sarah better before making a final decision about Betty. The next day, he went back to Tyler's house and proposed that Sarah come work for him temporarily while Betty would be suspended. Mrs. Sarah, I'd like you to come work at my house for a few weeks. You'd be in charge of the kitchen and general organization. Mr. Richard, I'd be very grateful for the opportunity, but I need to be honest with you about my health condition. I know about your diabetes, Mrs. Sarah. We'll make sure you eat properly during work. Sarah accepted the proposal with tears in her eyes. When Richard got home and told Betty she was suspended and that Sarah would temporarily take over, the reaction was explosive. Mr. Richard, you can't do this to me. I've worked here for 5 years. And during that time, you were stealing from me, Betty. But it was only in the last few months. Before that, I never did anything wrong. How can I be sure of that now? Betty began crying uncontrollably. Mr. Richard, if you send me away, my family will starve. My husband can't find work and I have 3 small children. Richard felt terrible seeing Betty's despair, but knew he couldn't simply ignore what had happened. Betty, you should have thought of that before stealing from me. Please, Mr. Richard, give me one more chance. I promise I'll never do it again. Richard was torn. On one hand, Betty had betrayed his trust. On the other, she was also a person with needs and responsibilities. Betty, I'll think about your situation, but for now you're suspended. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers tremendously. Now continuing. The following week, Sarah began working at Richard's house. The difference was immediate. She was extremely careful with food portions and always asked before making any decisions. Mr. Richard, there's some leftover lunch. What would you like me to do with it? You can put it in the fridge, Mrs. Sarah. We'll have it tomorrow. Sarah also proved to be an excellent cook. Her meals were flavorful and well-balanced. During that week, Richard kept thinking about Betty's case. He decided to investigate her family situation further. He discovered Betty truly had 3 small children and that her husband had been unemployed for several months. The family lived in a rented house in a working-class neighborhood and had several overdue bills. Richard also discovered something that surprised him. Betty had been buying extra ingredients with her own money. She wasn't simply taking ready-made food from his house, but purchasing additional ingredients and cooking larger quantities to have something to sell. This changed the situation somewhat. Betty wasn't exactly stealing prepared food, but using his kitchen and household resources for a side business. Richard decided to have a deeper conversation with Betty. Betty, I need to better understand what you were doing. You were buying extra ingredients. Yes, Mr. Richard. I bought them with my own money and cooked them along with the household food. Then I sold what was mine. But you were using my gas, my pots, my work time for this. That's true, Mr. Richard. I know I was wrong about that. And why didn't you ask me for help, Betty? Why didn't you tell me about your difficulties? I was ashamed, Mr. Richard. And I also thought you wouldn't mind, since I was using my own things too. Richard began to see the situation from a different perspective. Betty had done wrong, but it wasn't exactly the kind of theft he had initially imagined. That same day, Richard went to talk to Tyler about the new developments. Tyler, I found out Betty's situation is a bit different than we thought. How so, sir? She wasn't just taking ready-made food from my house. She was buying extra ingredients and using my kitchen to cook for her business. But that still isn't right, is it, sir? It isn't. But it's also not as serious as I first thought. Tyler grew thoughtful for a moment. Sir, Mrs. Betty also has kids to feed, right? The maturity of Tyler's observation impressed Richard. You're right, Tyler. Everyone has their needs. So maybe we can find a way to help everyone, sir. Richard smiled at the boy. At just 13, Tyler was showing wisdom many adults lacked. What kind of solution are you thinking of, Tyler? I don't know, sir. But sometimes when we fight, my mom says it's better to talk and find a way for everyone to be okay. Richard spent the next few days thinking of a solution that could benefit everyone involved. Finally, he had an idea. He called Betty, Sarah, and Tyler for a meeting at his house on Saturday morning. Everyone, I called you here because I want to propose a solution to this whole situation. They all fell silent, waiting for Richard to continue. Betty, you made a mistake by using my kitchen for your business without permission, but I understand you were trying to solve a serious financial problem. Betty nodded in agreement, still afraid of what would come next. Sarah, you've proven to be an excellent worker this week. Tyler, you were brave to report a wrongdoing, even knowing it could cause trouble. Richard paused before continuing. My proposal is this. Betty, you'll come back to work here, but with some conditions. First, you'll reimburse me for the money you spent using my resources. Second, if you want to continue your food business, it has to be done honestly and transparently. What do you mean, Mr. Richard? You can use my kitchen on weekends to prepare food to sell, but you'll pay me a rental fee for the resources used, and you'll do it outside your normal work hours. Betty was surprised by the proposal. And Mrs. Sarah, I'd like you to keep working here too. I can employ both of you. One would work mornings, the other afternoons. Sarah was moved by the offer. Mr. Richard, that would be wonderful for me. That way I can work and still take proper care of my health. And there's one more thing, Richard continued. I want you two to work together to prepare affordable meals to sell in the community, not to profit off others' needs, but to offer good, cheap food for those who need it. Tyler grinned when he heard the proposal. So people can eat well without paying too much, right, sir? Exactly, Tyler. And you, if you want, can help by making deliveries after school. The proposal pleased everyone. Betty would have an honest extra source of income, Sarah would have a job suited to her health limitations, and the community would have access to good food at fair prices. But there were still some obstacles to overcome. Jennifer, Richard's wife, wasn't too happy with the idea of having 2 employees and letting them run a business using their home kitchen. Richard, this is going to turn into a mess. Our house will look like a commercial restaurant. Jennifer, they'll only use the kitchen on weekends when we're not home, and it will be a way to help people in need. But what if something goes wrong? What if someone gets sick from eating their food and wants to sue us? Richard hadn't considered that possibility. He decided to consult a lawyer to understand the legal risks involved. The lawyer explained that there were indeed risks, but they could be minimized with some legal precautions, like well-defined contracts and proper insurance. While Richard was sorting out these bureaucratic issues, another problem arose. Mrs. Martha, the owner of the little shop, was not at all happy to hear she would lose exclusivity in selling Betty's special dishes. Betty, if you're selling directly now, you don't need to bring anything here for me anymore. Mrs. Martha, the idea isn't to compete with you. It's to sell at lower prices to help people. Lower prices? So you want to ruin my business? The situation created an unexpected conflict in the community. Some people supported the idea of cheaper food, while others thought it was unfair to Mrs. Martha, who had served the community for years. Richard found himself in the middle of a much more complicated situation than he had initially imagined. Tyler suggested they talk to Mrs. Martha to try and find a solution that worked for everyone. Sir, what if Mrs. Martha became a partner in the business too? How do you mean, Tyler? She could sell the meals at her counter so she wouldn't lose customers. Tyler's idea was interesting, but it meant Richard would have to bring another person into the partnership. When Richard proposed the idea to Mrs. Martha, she was skeptical at first. Why would a wealthy man like you want to get involved in poor folks' business? Mrs. Martha, I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing it because I've met good people who are struggling and I want to help. And how do I know you won't cheat me later? Richard understood Mrs. Martha's distrust. She had built her small business through hard work and was afraid of losing it. How about we try it for a month? If it doesn't work, we'll go back to how things were." Mrs. Martha agreed to the trial, but when they put the plan into action, new challenges emerged. Health inspectors showed up in the community to check if Mrs. Martha had a license to sell food prepared off-site. "You can't sell food prepared outside your establishment without the proper permits," the inspector explained. Richard discovered they would need to formalize a series of documents and permits for the business to operate legally. "Mr. Richard, this is going to cost a lot of money," said Betty, worried. "And it'll take months to get all the paperwork done," added Mrs. Martha. Richard faced a choice: give up on the project or invest time and money to get everything properly regulated. He decided it was worth trying. He hired an accountant to handle the bureaucracy and began investing in legalizing the business. But during this process, another problem arose. Some of Richard's neighbors started complaining about the extra activity at his house on weekends. "Richard, your house is turning into a commercial spot," one neighbor complained. "This is bringing down our neighborhood." The pressure from his neighbors put Richard in a tough spot. He didn't want to cause problems in the community, but he also didn't want to give up helping the people who had become important to him. Jennifer was also growing uncomfortable with the whole situation. "Richard, this is getting bigger than you imagined. Maybe it's better if you just help these people in a simpler way." "What do you mean, Jennifer?" "Give them money, pay for a vocational course, help them find other jobs. But turning our home into a business isn't working." Richard knew Jennifer had a point about some things. The project was becoming more complicated than he had anticipated. He decided to have an honest conversation with Betty, Sarah, Tyler, and Mrs. Martha about the challenges they were facing. "Everyone, I need to be frank with you. This project is running into a lot of obstacles I hadn't foreseen." They all grew uneasy, fearing Richard might give up. "But that doesn't mean I'm giving up on you," Richard continued. "We just need to find a different way to make it work." Tyler was the first to speak. "Sir, what if we moved the business somewhere else? Somewhere that wouldn't bother the neighbors?" Tyler's suggestion made Richard think. Maybe the solution really was to find a more suitable location for the business. "Tyler, do you know any place in the community where we could set up a small kitchen?" "There's Mrs. Mary's house. It's been empty for a few months. She said she wanted to rent it out, but no one's shown interest." Richard went to see Mrs. Mary's house. It was a simple structure, but it had a spacious kitchen and was well located in the community. Mrs. Mary, a woman in her 70s, was excited about the idea of renting out her home. "Mr. Richard, I'd be so happy if my house could help the folks around here." Richard negotiated a fair rent with Mrs. Mary and began planning how to adapt the house into a community kitchen. But when he tried to implement the idea, he discovered significant renovations would be needed to meet health regulations. "Mr. Richard, you'll need to replace the entire floor, remodel the kitchen, and install proper ventilation," explained the engineer who assessed the place. Richard estimated the renovations would cost nearly $20,000. It was a major investment with no guaranteed return. At that moment, Tyler made an observation that changed Richard's perspective on the whole project. "Sir, why are you doing all this to help us?" The boy's simple question made Richard reflect deeply on his motivations. "You know, Tyler, at first I just wanted to solve Betty's problem, but after meeting all of you, I realized there are so many good people going through tough times, and if I can help, why not? But you don't owe us anything, sir. I don't owe you, but I want to. You've shown me important things about life and what really matters." Richard realized the project had become much more than just a solution to a problem. It had become a way for him to grow as a person and contribute to his community. He decided to move forward with the renovations, no matter the cost. But 2 days before work was set to begin, Mrs. Mary received an offer to buy the house for far more than she'd ever imagined it was worth. "Mr. Richard, I'm sorry, but someone's come forward wanting to buy my house. It's an amount that'll change my whole life." Richard completely understood Mrs. Mary's situation and didn't try to talk her out of selling. Once again, the project needed rethinking. It was Sarah who suggested the next alternative. "Mr. Richard, what if we started small, making meals in my own house and selling them right on the street?" "Mrs. Sarah, Does your house have enough space? It does, and I know other women in the community who are good cooks. We could form a group. Sarah's idea was interesting. Instead of creating one centralized business, they could build a network of cooks working from their own homes. Richard liked the proposal because it was simpler and didn't require complex permits. How would this network work, Mrs. Sarah? Each person would cook at home and sell at different spots in the community. That way, we wouldn't compete with each other. And I could help organize the orders, Tyler suggested. And I would keep selling from my counter, added Mrs. Martha. Richard saw they had finally found a solution that could work for everyone. They began implementing the Network of Cooks project. Richard provided the initial capital to buy ingredients and basic utensils. Each cook would contribute their labor and culinary knowledge. Betty would be the general coordinator, Sarah would handle quality control, Mrs. Martha would be one of the sales points, and Tyler would help with organizing and delivering orders. The project started working better than Richard had imagined. Within 2 weeks, 5 cooks were already part of the network, and orders were increasing daily. But success brought new challenges. Some cooks began struggling to maintain the quality and timeliness of orders. Others started competing with each other for customers. Richard found himself once again mediating conflicts and solving operational issues. "Mr. Richard, Mrs. Amy is making the same dish as me and selling it cheaper," complained one of the cooks. "And Mrs. Rebecca is delaying orders, which is hurting all of our reputations," complained another. Richard realized they needed clearer rules for how the network would operate. He called all the participants for a meeting and proposed creating an internal set of guidelines. "Folks, for this to work well, we need some basic rules that everyone must follow." The rules included delivery schedules, quality standards, territorial divisions to avoid competition, and a fair pricing system. Most of the cooks agreed, but 2 found the rules too restrictive and decided to leave the network. "Mr. Richard, we'd rather work on our own," they said. Richard respected their decision, but worried others might want to leave too. To his surprise, the departure of the 2 cooks ended up benefiting the network. Those who stayed were more committed to the collective project, and overall quality improved. Within a month, the network was running steadily and profitably for all participants. Sarah was able to buy the medicine she needed regularly. Betty managed to pay off her family's overdue bills. Mrs. Martha saw her sales increase significantly, and Tyler was able to help more at home while also earning a small income from deliveries. Richard felt fulfilled, seeing how an initial problem had turned into a solution that benefited so many people. But the story wasn't over yet. 3 months after the network began, Richard discovered something that made him incredibly proud. Tyler had used the money he earned from deliveries to buy books and was studying on his own to try for a scholarship at a private school. "Sir, I want to study business administration so I can help coordinate projects like the one we created," Tyler said. The boy's ambition and determination moved Richard deeply. "Tyler, if you get the scholarship, I'll cover whatever it doesn't pay for." "Really, sir? You'd do that?" "Of course. You deserve every opportunity in the world." Richard also found out that Sarah had started studying nutrition through free online courses to improve the nutritional quality of the meals. "Mr. Richard, I've learned that many people in the community have health issues that could be improved with proper food," Sarah explained. "What kind of issues?" "Diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol. If we learn to make healthier meals, we could really help these people." Sarah's initiative gave Richard a new idea. What if they expanded the project to include nutritional guidance? Richard spoke with a familiar doctor about the possibility of partnering to offer free nutritional guidance in the community. The doctor, Dr. Michael, was intrigued by the idea. "Richard, this could make a real difference in these people's health. Many health issues in the community are related to poor eating habits due to lack of knowledge, not lack of will." Dr. Michael offered to give monthly talks in the community about healthy eating and disease prevention. When Richard proposed this new expansion of the project to the cooks, they were all excited. "Mr. Richard, it would be wonderful to learn how to make food that helps people stay healthier," said Betty. The project continued to grow organically. Richard found himself increasingly involved, not just as a funder, but as an active part of the community. Jennifer, who had initially been reluctant, also began to participate. "Richard, what if I organized a crafts course for the women in the community? They could make things to sell and earn extra income." Richard was happy to see his wife taking an interest in the project too. 6 months after the first meeting with Tyler, Richard looked back and could hardly believe all that had happened. What had started as an accusation about stolen food had turned into a community support network, benefiting dozens of families. Betty had become a respected leader in the community, coordinating not just the network of cooks, but also other social projects. Sarah had become the community's informal nutritionist, advising families on healthy eating and disease prevention. Mrs. Martha had tripled her earnings and become a go-to person for information and services in the community. And Tyler had earned the scholarship he'd wanted so badly and was excelling as one of the top students in his school. But the one who had benefited the most was Richard himself. "Jennifer, you know, I feel more fulfilled with this project than with any business I've ever done in my life." "Why do you think that is, Richard?" "Because here, I see directly how my work is improving people's lives. In my regular business, I make money, but I don't see the human impact of what I do." Richard began dedicating more and more time to the community project and less to his traditional business. His partners were concerned at first, but soon realized Richard was more motivated and creative than ever. "Richard, you're different, more energized, more focused," one of his partners remarked. "It's because I've found a purpose that truly motivates me," Richard replied. A year after the first meeting with Tyler, Richard organized a celebration in the community to commemorate everything they had achieved together. The gathering brought together over 200 people, community residents, the Cooks families, and even some of Richard's neighbors who had changed their minds about the project. During the celebration, Richard gave an emotional speech. "A year ago, a brave boy told me about a problem happening in my own home. I could have simply solved that one issue and moved on with my life. But you all taught me that individual problems are often reflections of bigger issues and that collective solutions are always better than individual ones." Richard looked at Tyler, who was in the front row, with a proud smile. "Tyler, thank you for having the courage to come to me that day. You've changed not just your life, but the lives of many people, including mine." Tyler stood up and walked over to Richard. "Sir, thank you for believing in me and helping us turn a problem into a solution." The two embraced as the crowd cheered emotionally. Sarah also wanted to speak during the celebration. "Mr. Richard, when my son told me about you, I thought you were just another rich man who'd promise help and then disappear. But you've proven there are good people in the world, people who truly care about others." Betty was next to speak. "Mr. Richard, I made a lot of mistakes at first. I could have lost everything because of them. But you gave me a second chance and helped me turn my need into an honest opportunity to grow." Mrs. Martha, always more reserved, also wanted to express her gratitude. "Mr. Richard, my little shop was just a way to survive. Today it's a support center for the whole community. Thank you for including me in this dream." At the end of the celebration, Richard sat with Tyler on a makeshift bench in the yard. "Tyler, what have you learned from all this?" "I've learned that sometimes problems are just opportunities in disguise, sir. And when people come together to help each other, everyone wins." "And what do you plan to do with everything you've learned?" "I want to study so I can create more projects like this, sir. There are so many good people who just need a chance." Richard smiled, knowing Tyler was right. "Tyler, I'm sure you'll do incredible things in life, and whenever you need help, you can count on me. And if I ever get rich like you, I'll help others the way you helped us." Richard hugged the boy, moved by his maturity and generosity. 2 years later, Richard officially turned the community project into a social enterprise, with Betty as general manager and Sarah as technical coordinator. The network of cooks had grown to 15 participants and now served not just the Greenview Heights community, but 3 other neighboring areas as well. Tyler, now 15, was finishing high school with excellent grades and had already been accepted into a university to study business administration with a focus on social economics. Richard remained the project's main investor, but now he also received small dividends proving that social good and economic sustainability could go hand in hand. The project had become a model studied by other social organizations, and Richard was often invited to share his experience at seminars on social entrepreneurship. But what made him proudest wasn't the external recognition, it was the personal transformations he witnessed daily. Betty had become a natural leader, not just coordinating the network of cooks, but also mediating conflicts and organizing other community initiatives. Sarah had graduated as a nutrition technician and was helping families improve their diets and health. Mrs. Martha had expanded her business and hired 2 employees, creating more jobs in the community, and dozens of others had been directly or indirectly impacted by the project. But the most significant change had been within Richard's own family. Jennifer had become fully involved in the project and discovered a passion for social work she never knew she had. Richard's daughter, who had initially viewed the project with indifference, had started volunteering in community activities and decided she wanted to study social work. "Dad, what you and Mom did changed how I see the world," she said. "I want a career that lets me help people the way you do." Richard felt fulfilled seeing that he'd passed on important values to his daughter. 3 years after first meeting Tyler, Richard was walking through the community when he spotted the boy, now a young man of 16, explaining business concepts to a group of teenagers. "Guys, a business only works if it benefits everyone involved," Tyler was saying. "If someone ends up losing, the business isn't sustainable." Richard stopped to listen to Tyler's explanation, impressed by his maturity and knowledge. When Tyler finished talking with the teenagers, he approached Richard. "Hi, sir. It's so good to see you here." "Tyler, were you teaching those boys about business management?" "I was. They want to start a group selling handmade products and asked for my help to organize it." "And you already know enough to teach others?" "Ah, sir, you learn so much more when you have to teach. And besides, what we've learned here is worth more than a lot of book theory." Richard felt prouder and prouder of Tyler's growth. "Tyler, in a few months you'll be starting college. Are you excited?" "Very, sir, but also a little nervous. It'll be different from what I'm used to." "It will be different for sure, but I have no doubt you'll adapt well. And remember, your experience here is valuable knowledge that many of your classmates won't have." "That's true, sir. I think I'll be able to contribute a lot to discussions about social entrepreneurship." Richard walked Tyler home to greet Sarah. "Mrs. Sarah, how are you feeling about Tyler starting college?" "Proud, Mr. Richard. Sometimes I can't believe my son is going to be a college student. A few years ago, I wouldn't have even dreamed this was possible." "And how's your health?" "Much better, thank God. Since I started eating better and taking my medicine regularly, my diabetes is under control, and my work brings me so much joy." Richard felt moved, seeing how Sarah's life had improved. "Mrs. Sarah, have you ever thought about formalizing your nutrition knowledge? Maybe even going to college yourself?" "Oh, Mr. Richard, I think I'm too old for that." "Nonsense, Mrs. Sarah. You're only 43. You still have plenty of time to study and grow professionally." Sarah grew thoughtful at Richard's suggestion. "You really think I could do it?" "I'm absolutely certain. You've already shown you have the intelligence, dedication, and passion for what you do. Those are the most important ingredients for academic success." A few months later, Sarah applied for a public university's nutrition program. Richard helped her with her studies. When the results came out, Sarah had been accepted. The celebration for Sarah's acceptance was almost as big as the project's 1-year anniversary party. "Mr. Richard, if someone had told me 4 years ago that I'd be going to college, I'd have said they were crazy," Sarah said, emotional. "Mrs. Sarah, you deserve every opportunity in the world, and I'm sure you'll be an excellent nutritionist." Richard was experiencing one of the most rewarding phases of his life. His traditional businesses were still thriving, but it was the social project that gave him the deepest personal satisfaction. Jennifer was equally fulfilled by the community work and had decided to specialize in social organization management. "Richard, I never imagined I'd find so much purpose in helping others," she said. "Neither did I, Jennifer. I think we've discovered a side of ourselves we didn't know existed." Richard's daughter, Emily, was in her last year of high school and had already decided she wanted to study social work at a prestigious university. "Dad, I want to work in community development, just like you do, she said. Richard felt proud knowing he had passed on important values to his family. 4 years after first meeting Tyler, Richard received a special invitation. Tyler was graduating with a degree in business administration and had asked Richard to be the guest speaker at his ceremony. "Sir, you were the one who gave me my first real opportunity in life. Nothing would be fairer than having you by my side on my graduation day." Richard accepted the invitation with great emotion. On the day of Tyler's graduation, Richard gave a speech that moved the entire audience. "Dear graduates, you're graduating in a field that has the power to transform society. But I want to tell you about a young man who began practicing administration long before entering university." Richard shared the story of how he met Tyler and how a seemingly simple problem had turned into a project that benefited hundreds of people. "Tyler taught me that true administration isn't just about profits and efficiency. It's about creating solutions that benefit everyone involved. It's about using knowledge to build a fairer and more compassionate society." When Richard finished his speech, the audience rose in enthusiastic applause. Tyler stepped onto the stage to receive his diploma and made sure to hug Richard before anything else. "Thank you, sir, for believing in me from day one. Thank you, Tyler, for teaching me that the courage to do what's right can change the world." After the ceremony, Richard, Jennifer, Sarah, Betty, Mrs. Martha, and many other friends gathered to celebrate Tyler's achievement. During the celebration, Tyler announced his future plans. "Everyone, I've received a scholarship to pursue a master's in solidarity economics. I want to specialize in creating business models that benefit entire communities." "And after your master's, what are your plans?" Richard asked. "I want to come back here and expand our project to other regions. I believe the model we created can be replicated in many places." Richard smiled, knowing Tyler had found his life's purpose. "Tyler, you'll always have my support for any project you want to develop." "And mine too," said Sarah. "After all, you're my son, and I believe in your potential." "And mine," added Betty. "You taught us that age isn't an obstacle to learning and growing." Mrs. Martha, always more sparing with words, simply said, "I'm proud to have been part of this boy's journey." During the celebration, Richard reflected on everything that had happened over the past 4 years. What had started as an accusation about stolen food had turned into a journey of personal growth for everyone involved. Betty had become a respected social entrepreneur. Sarah was studying nutrition and specializing in community food programs. Mrs. Martha had expanded her business and become a leader in the community. And Tyler had graduated in administration, ready to carry forward the work they had started together. But beyond individual transformations, the project had created a network of solidarity that kept growing and benefiting more and more people. Richard looked around the party and saw dozens of people whose lives had been touched in some way by the project. Cooks, customers, family members, neighbors, they were all part of a community that had grown stronger and more united. "Jennifer, do you regret getting involved in all this?" "Never, Richard. It's the best thing we've ever done. We've learned that true wealth isn't in what we accumulate, but in what we build together with others." "Emily, what about you? Do you think your parents went crazy with this social project?" "No, Dad. You taught me that success only matters when it's shared. I hope to make a difference in people's lives just like you do." Richard felt complete hearing his family's words. 5 years after first meeting Tyler, Richard was organizing the opening of another project hub in a neighboring community when he received a special call. "Sir, it's me, Tyler. I have some news to share." "Hi, Tyler. What's the news?" "I got approval for a research project on solidarity economics. I'll be able to study our model and propose scientific improvements." "That's wonderful, Tyler. Does this mean our work could become an academic reference?" "Exactly, sir. And there's more. The university wants to partner with us to create a community development lab." Richard was moved by the news. The project that had started so simply was becoming a benchmark model. "Tyler, this is fantastic. It means we'll be able to help even more communities." "That's right, sir. And I'd like to invite you to be the research co-advisor. After all, you're the one with the hands-on experience." Richard accepted the invitation with great enthusiasm. In the following months, Richard divided his time between his businesses, the community project, and academic activities. Tyler's research was documenting every aspect of the project, from the management model to the social and economic impacts. The preliminary results were impressive. The project had generated direct income for over 50 families, indirect income for another 100, improved nutrition for more than 500 people, and created a solidarity network benefiting the entire region. "Sir, the numbers show our model is truly effective," said Tyler, presenting the research data. "I'm glad, Tyler. But what makes me proudest isn't the numbers. It's the personal transformations we've witnessed." "That's true, sir. The numbers matter, but the life stories are what really count." During Tyler's final research presentation at the university, Richard was invited to speak about the project's practical experience. "Professors and students, when I met Tyler 5 years ago, he was just a brave boy trying to solve a problem. Today, he's a young researcher proposing scientific solutions for complex social issues." Richard recounted the whole story, from his first meeting with Tyler to the development of the solidarity economics model they were presenting. "What I've learned these 5 years is that social problems often have simpler solutions than we imagine, but these solutions only work when built collectively, with everyone's participation." The presentation was well received by the review panel, and Tyler earned top marks for his research. After the defense, Richard and Tyler sat in the university courtyard to talk. "Tyler, I'm so proud of you. In 5 years, you've gone from being a boy selling candy to a university researcher. And none of it would have happened if you hadn't believed in me that first day, sir. Tyler, I just offered opportunities. You're the one who made the most of them, with your hard work and dedication. Sir, now that I've finished my master's, I want to focus entirely on expanding our project. Will you be my official partner?" Richard smiled, remembering how it had all started with a simple accusation about stolen food. "I accept, Tyler, but on one condition. You'll be the executive director. After all, you understand it best now." "Deal, sir, but you'll still be my advisor and mentor." They sealed the agreement with a hug, knowing they were starting a new phase of their work together. 6 years after their first meeting, Richard was attending the inauguration of the project's 10th branch when a local journalist approached him. "Mr. Richard, how do you assess the project's results after these 6 years? The results have exceeded all my expectations, but what amazes me most is seeing how people grow when given the right opportunities. Do you regret investing so much time and money in this social project instead of focusing solely on your traditional businesses?" "I could never regret it. This project has given me rewards that no amount of money could ever buy. Seeing people transform their lives and become agents of change in their own community is priceless." "And what are the plans for the future?" Tyler, who is now our executive director, is developing a plan to create 50 hubs over the next 5 years. We're also working on a methodology so other organizations can replicate our model. After the interview, Richard found Tyler talking to a group of young college students who wanted to learn about the project. "Folks, the important thing to understand is that every great project starts with one person brave enough to do what's right," Tyler was saying. Richard approached the group. "Tyler's right. Our project began when he, at just 13 years old, had the courage to tell me about a problem that was hurting his family." "And how did you turn a problem into such a big project?" asked one of the students. "One decision at a time," Richard replied. "We never planned for it to become this big. We just tackled each problem as it came and seized the opportunities that arose." "And always keeping the focus on people," Tyler added. "Techniques and methodologies matter, but what truly makes a difference is genuine commitment to people's well-being." After the students left, Richard and Tyler were alone to talk. "Tyler, sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come to me that day." "I think about that too, sir. I'd probably still be selling candy at the traffic light. My mom would still be sick, and hundreds of people wouldn't have had the opportunities they did. And I'd still be just another businessman, only concerned with profits and competition." "You were never just another businessman, sir. You've always had a good heart. I just helped you see it." Richard smiled, touched by Tyler's words. "Tyler, you know I think of you as a son, right? And I think of you as my second father, sir. You've given me everything a father could: education, opportunities, values, and love." The two embraced, sealing a friendship that had become a chosen family. That evening, Richard returned home with a heart full of gratitude. "Jennifer, you know I feel like the luckiest man in the world." "Why's that, Richard?" "Because I've had the chance to meet incredible people like Tyler, Sarah, Betty, and Mrs. Martha. They've taught me that true wealth lies in the relationships we build and the good we do for others. And I feel like the luckiest woman in the world for realizing I can make a difference in people's lives," Jennifer said. Emily, now in her second year of social work, arrived home just then. "Dad, Mom, you know you're my greatest inspiration, right? You've taught me that success only matters when it's shared." Richard hugged the two most important women in his life, feeling complete and fulfilled. 7 years after first meeting Tyler, Richard was preparing for a special presentation. He'd been invited to share the project story at a national conference on social entrepreneurship, and Tyler would be the technical presenter. "Sir, nervous about the presentation?" Tyler asked. "A little. I've never spoken to such a big crowd about such personal things." "Relax, sir. Just tell the story as it really happened. People will be moved because it's a true story of transformation." During the presentation, Richard recounted the entire journey, from his first meeting with Tyler to developing the methodology now being replicated across multiple states. "Ladies and gentlemen, what I want to make clear is that none of us set out to create a high-impact social project. We simply responded to situations as they arose in our lives, always trying to do what we thought was right." Richard spoke about the challenges, failures, doubts, and victories they had experienced over the years. "The most important lesson I've learned is that complex social problems often have simpler solutions than we imagine. But those solutions only appear when we genuinely engage with people and their needs." After Richard's presentation, Tyler took the stage to discuss the technical and methodological aspects of the project. Folks, what my mentor Richard didn't mention is that he transformed the lives of hundreds of people without ever studying social work or community development. He did it simply because he genuinely cared. Tyler shared impressive data about the project's impact. 200 families directly benefited, 3,000 people with access to quality food, 200 jobs created, and a methodology now being replicated in 15 states. But beyond the numbers, what truly matters are the individual transformations we witness every day, Tyler said. After the presentations, Richard and Tyler were surrounded by dozens of people eager to learn more. "How did you keep the project sustainable for so long?" asked a business owner. "Sustainability isn't just financial," Richard replied. "It's also emotional, social, and environmental. When you create a project that truly benefits people, they commit to keeping it running." "What advice would you give to someone starting a social project?" asked a student. "Start small, with people you know," Tyler answered. "Don't try to solve all the world's problems at once. Tackle one issue at a time and do it well. And most importantly, involve the people who will benefit in the planning and execution," Richard added. "The best solutions come from those who face these challenges daily." After the conference, Richard and Tyler returned to their hometown, where they were welcomed with a celebration organized by the community. "Mr. Richard Tyler, you've brought pride to our town," the mayor said during the reception. "Mr. Mayor, the pride is ours for being part of such a welcoming and supportive community," Richard replied. "It's true," Tyler added. "Everything we achieved was possible because of the support of people like Mrs. Sarah, Mrs. Betty, Mrs. Martha, and hundreds of others who believed in our work." During the celebration, Richard was moved to see how the project had fostered a true network of friendship and solidarity in the community. Sarah, now a nutrition graduate, was coordinating a food education program serving all local schools. Betty had become a respected entrepreneur, leading a cooperative of 15 industrial cooks, providing meals for companies across several cities. Mrs. Martha had expanded her business and become a commercial leader in the community, always supporting new entrepreneurs. And dozens of others had found opportunities for professional and personal growth through the project. "Sir, sometimes I'm amazed by everything that's happened," Tyler said to Richard during the celebration. "Me too, Tyler. But you know what amazes me most?" "What?" seeing how every person touched by the project has become an agent of change for others. The impact goes far beyond what we can measure. Richard was right. The project had created a culture of solidarity and social entrepreneurship that continued to spread organically. 8 years after first meeting Tyler, Richard received a phone call that moved him deeply. "Sir, I have some amazing news to share," said Tyler. "What news, Tyler?" "I received an offer to write a book about our methodology. A publisher wants to share our story and make it accessible to people across the country." "Tyler, that's fantastic. It means our experience can help so many other communities." "Exactly, sir. And I want you to be the co-author of the book. After all, this story is ours, not just mine." Richard accepted the proposal with great enthusiasm. In the following months, Richard and Tyler worked together on writing the book, revisiting every moment of the journey they had shared. "Sir, looking back on our whole story makes me realize how much we've grown together," Tyler said during one of their writing sessions. "It's true, Tyler. I learned just as much from you as you did from me. It was a genuine exchange of knowledge and experiences." The book was released to great success, becoming a reference in social entrepreneurship and community development. But what moved Richard the most wasn't the book's commercial success. It was the messages they started receiving from people replicating the methodology in their own communities. "Tyler, look at this message," Richard said, showing an email. "It's from a community in rural Kansas that created 40 jobs using our methodology." "And this one, sir?" Tyler replied, showing another message. "It's from a group of women in Minnesota who started a sewing cooperative based on our principles." Richard felt fulfilled seeing that the work they had developed was making a positive impact in distant places. 9 years after their first meeting, Richard organized a special gathering with all the original participants of the project. "Everyone, I wanted to bring you together to reflect on everything that's happened in these 9 years," Richard said. Present were Sarah, Betty, Mrs. Martha, Tyler, Jennifer, Emily, and many others who had been part of the journey from the beginning. "Mr. Richard, when this all started, I never imagined I'd be where I am today," said Sarah. "I'm a certified nutritionist. I have my own clinic, and I even coordinate food education programs in the region. And I never thought I'd become a respected business owner," said Betty. "Our cooperative employs over 50 people and is a reference for healthy food in the area. And I never dreamed my little shop would turn into a community development center," said Mrs. Martha. "Now we offer microloans, vocational courses, and support for new entrepreneurs." Each person shared their journey of growth and transformation over the 9 years. "I graduated in social work and now work for an NGO that uses the methodology you developed," said Emily. "And I started a community development consultancy that's helping projects across the country," said Tyler. Richard was moved listening to everyone's stories of growth. "Everyone, do you know what makes me proudest in all of this?" "What, Mr. Richard?" several asked at once. "Seeing how each of you has become a multiplier of opportunities for others. The impact of our project goes far beyond what we can measure." Jennifer also spoke during the gathering. "Richard, this journey didn't just change the lives of people in the community, it changed our family life too. We discovered values and purposes we didn't even know we had." "That's true, Mum," said Emily. "You all taught me that success only matters when it's shared with others." At the end of the meeting, Richard proposed a toast. "I'd like to raise a glass to Tyler, who had the courage to come to me 9 years ago to talk about a problem. If he hadn't been that brave, none of this would have happened. And I'd like to toast to Sir Richard, who could have simply solved the initial problem and gone on with his life, but chose to genuinely engage with our community," replied Tyler. Everyone raised their glasses, moved by the journey they'd shared. 10 years after first meeting Tyler, Richard was attending the inauguration of the project's 100th center when he had a special realization. "Tyler, do you realize today marks exactly 10 years since we met?" "It's true, sir. 10 years ago, you were walking to the office when I approached you on the sidewalk. And who could have imagined that conversation would change so many lives?" Richard looked around at the inauguration ceremony and saw hundreds of people whose lives had been transformed by the project. "Sir, sometimes I think about how different things would be if you hadn't paid attention to me that day. And I think about how different it would be if you hadn't had the courage to approach me." During the ceremony, Richard was invited to give a special speech about the project's 10 years. "Ladies and gentlemen, exactly 10 years ago, a 13-year-old boy taught me the most important lesson of my life, that problems are opportunities in disguise, and that the best solutions come when we genuinely engage with people." Richard told the whole story once more, but this time with the perspective of a decade of experience. "What I've learned in these 10 years is that social transformation doesn't happen through grand gestures or massive investments. It happens through genuine relationships, steady commitment, and faith in people." After the speech, Richard and Tyler were interviewed by several journalists. "What's the secret to the project's success?" one reporter asked. "There is no secret," Richard replied. "Just the commitment to always do what's right for people, even when it's hard or doesn't bring immediate benefits." "And what are the plans for the next 10 years?" another journalist asked. "We want our methodology to become unnecessary," Tyler answered. "In other words, we want the principles of solidarity and social entrepreneurship to become so common that they no longer need special projects to exist." After the interviews, Richard and Tyler walked together through the streets of the community where it all began. "Tyler, do you remember how it was here 10 years ago?" "I sure do, sir. There was much more poverty, fewer opportunities, less hope. And now? Now the community is thriving. People have dignity and opportunities, and most importantly, there's a culture of solidarity that sustains itself." Richard smiled, satisfied with the transformation he'd witnessed. "Tyler, thank you for these incredible 10 years. You've changed my life in ways I can never fully repay." "Sir, you changed my life too. And the most beautiful part is that we changed each other's lives by changing the lives of so many others." The two embraced, sealing a decade of partnership, friendship, and social impact. That night, Richard returned home with a heart full of gratitude and the certainty that he'd lived one of the most meaningful experiences a person can have, the chance to make a real difference in others' lives. Jennifer: "10 years ago, I was just a successful businessman. Today, I feel like a complete person." Richard: "10 years ago, our family was materially successful. Today, we're successful in every way, materially, emotionally, socially, and spiritually." Emily, now a social work graduate and working on expanding the project, arrived home at that moment. "Dad, Mom, you know you're my greatest inspiration, right? You taught me that true success in life is measured by the good we do for others." Richard hugged his family, feeling like the most fulfilled man in the world. He had discovered that true wealth wasn't in what he owned, but in what he built together with others. And the story that began with a simple accusation about stolen food had turned into a journey of transformation that would continue to impact lives for many generations to come. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave your sincere words in the comments. Do you think Richard made the right choice by trusting Tyler? We'd love to hear your opinion. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories.